I thought I'd do a little video on what Putin calls the denazification and de-radicalization of Ukraine and these sorts of things. And I just wanted to put it in context how this can be spun as being true to those that want to believe it. And it's because of the Azov regiment, or the Azov Battalion as they're called now, which are now, in fact, since mid of 2014, incorporated into the National Guard of Ukraine, but it was originally a volunteer militia that was set up down in the Donbass region, and they're still fighting. It seems they're doing an excellent job even now, even though they're encircled at Mariupol. We keep getting little videos from this crew that are in an infantry fighting vehicle, BTG, I think it's not a BTG, BTR. It's either BTR 80 or BTR 90. Hard to say. I think it might be an older one because the gun doesn't appear to be particularly stabilised. It doesn't seem to be able to fire on the move. It's got a 30mm cannon in it. And we're getting little videos of this little group zooming around in this BTR, flooring it, stopping from at some sneaky little place where they can see a Russian armoured vehicle. And they seem extremely good at hitting all the right spots. I was actually watching the tactics. I'm not jumping ahead here, but I might as well say it now. Very good with their actual, tactical way of firing on it. Because you've only got, these are quite big cannon shells, but they're not like the main arm of a tank or anything. They seem to be very good. So I got a black and white or thermal computer screen, and it's an auto cannon, so it's loaded either from a big long belt with like 500 rounds or a box or something. So you've got a lot of ammo, and it can fire up to something like 600 rounds per minute. So we're talking about similar to like a Maxim gun in World War I, a Vickers machine gun or whatever. And on this little screen, that the gunner, there's three people, got a driver, a commander, and a gunner, and you can have up to maybe sort of 8 or 10 people in the back because it is an infantry fighting vehicle, like our Warrior, but these are better actually. And yeah, they sort of bomb down, find a little defile to fire from, somewhere there's a bit of cover where they're hidden, whatever. And then the gunner, just goes nuts, and he just, rakes all the vulnerable parts of whatever he's looking at. And the thing that was interesting, the tactic, he was even firing down into the road beneath the vehicles in an attempt to bounce the rounds up into the underbelly of the tank. And it seemed to work, because that cooked off its ammunition when he did that, and the thing blew up. So, taking out tanks, it wasn't all tanks, but taking out a tank with a 30mm cannon, even when tanks have explosive reactive armour and stuff, that is not an easy feat, but they know what they're doing, and you can see they're battle hardened, this Azov Battalion, because they've been doing this, as I said, since the initial sort of ghost Russian army, as some people call it, their invasion in 2014, when they took Crimea and took parts of the Donbass and so on. Yeah, so that's just one example. The reason why we've seen that is these ones, they got someone there videoing on their little computer screen so you can see the firing on the Russian armour. And it's very impressive, just, these things are quite quick as well. I think they can go up to like 45 mile an hour or something, even though they weigh like 15 tons. And yeah, just zoom out, find a bit of fire, boom, and it's, he rattles it off, because you said on high or low rate of fire, and here's his high. So it's almost like attacking a target with a machine gun, but it's 30mm explosive shells, or armor-piercing, ones. So I guess they go in a little bit and then they explode. You can put different types of rounds in them. But are these people, are they Nazis? Are they patriotic Ukrainians? Why aren't they in the regular army? Why are they just sort of officially now part of the National Guard, but still considered trained civilians, really? It's interesting. I've watched a few reports on it now, where they've actually sent in reporters and managed to sneak them through different checkpoints. Most of them were older, not sort of new ones. It was more when the war hadn't turned into a full-scale invasion as it has now. But I have to say, for talking to them, they're a mixed bunch, but they all seem to be very happy with their comrades and their mates. And if you ask them, which they have done, why are you fighting? And they say, well, I'm fighting for my mother and my father, or my daughter, or my wife. So they're all fighting to protect themselves and protect their country. They don't seem to mention Ukraine that much. They're more thinking, I think, about their local towns, some of which have been absolutely smashed to pieces by the war, and their own relatives. It's interesting when you ask them, what are your politics? Do you have political views? And one of them said he's an anarchist. Another one said he is a nationalist. They didn't seem to have one unified policy. Certainly none of them said I'm a Nazi or anything like that. But they appeared to be a mixed bag of people that were quite, radical. They looked a bit scary, to be honest, this lot. I don't think you want to be taken prisoner by them. I don't think you're going to be treated by the Geneva Convention. That was my suspicion, though. That's just a suspicion. Is there evidence of Nazism, which is commonly confused with fascism? The big difference, by the way, between a Nazi and a fascist is that fascism really was far less anti-Semitic. Nazism was really one of the main planks, as well as nationalism and being a socialist in terms of the state having control of the means of production and so on. It was highly Semitic. So it was those three things, the most important things: the nationalism, the socialism, and the anti-Semitism was a big part of it. Fascism, when we had, for example, the fascist dictator Benito Mussolini in Italy, they were not particularly anti-Semitic. Hitler was always urging, people like Franco in Spain and people like Mussolini to be more anti-Semitic. But actually, Italy didn't really want to deport its Jews, and they were doing. They were begrudgingly going along with it as the war went on, because this was clearly one of Hitler's main war aims to, alleviate. Remove Jews from, well, if not the world, certainly everywhere the Nazis could touch. So, is it true that there's denazification going on? I must say, they were having one of these sort of, it looks like a far-right kind of parade, where they all had their torches blowing and stuff, glowing. It was reminiscent of Nazi scenes, And yeah, you could tell these people are not regular soldiers. They are more like, I don't know, a very rough paramilitary type of people with strong beliefs. So I can understand that if you take videos of parades like that and so on, and then you're playing them on Russian TV, you can easily spin this as we are going over there to denazify the place because they've come under the influence of these Nazis. Look, they've even incorporated them into their National Defence Force, or not their army, but the territorial equivalent of our territorial army. One of the worries I do have about this is I could see afterwards, let's say Ukraine do win. Do we suddenly find that these people want to set up their own separatist region where they're in charge? And will it still commit atrocities or whatever? Will it be just as radical as, the things we're seeing the Russians do? How do you put these people, and this probably goes for all of these civilian volunteers that are now being trained up, men and women, how do you put these people back into normal life if and when the war ends and they survive? How do you reintegrate them back into society? If you've spent literally years, it's 8 years now that some of these have been fighting, if they've survived, all that time they've been fighting, they've been killing people, they've seen their mates get killed, they may have brutalised people, we don't know. It's like, when an animal goes feral, one that's sort of previously trained and, a civilized animal, and then it sort of reverts back to the wild, because these are wild people, literally these are people, even up to their leader, who does have an office and stuff. His office is full of weapons, and all of this lot, they're sort of living, it's like reading a bit of 1984 or watching Terminator or something. the way they were also hanging out in bunkers, and they're like the group I was watching just now. It was an orphanage that no longer had any orphans in it, but they'd converted it into sort of their staging post, their home almost. So there's a bunch of men there, tons and tons of weapons, lots of, I don't know if it's vodka they drink there, probably lots of that too. Chain smoking cigarettes as well. How do you convert them back after all of that? They don't want to be sort of regular soldiers, and of course there'd be far too many to incorporate into a peacetime army. How do you convert those people back into just being normal people? Will they go back into normal, regular, everyday jobs? I can see that whoever wins this war, certainly if it's Ukraine that wins it, they will have a lot of people who will struggle to go back into normal life, and that's always been a problem. That's always been a problem, especially as these are obviously the keen ones, the ones that have signed up very early to volunteer to fight. So maybe these ones have a particular lust for war. And one of the things that happens is it's like getting desensitized, or getting tolerant, as we call it in pharmacy, to drug, whereby at first it has an effect, then after a while you just get used to it, and if you take it away, you get withdrawal symptoms. This is what happens with the fear that they initially had. They were sort of saying, when I first went into army, I won't put it how they put it, but I was having absolute terror when I first was in a firefight. Now, not so much. Yeah, I'm still have a bit of fear, obviously, otherwise I'd be dead. You have to be careful, but they are getting desensitized to this violence. And if it does end, it will be a big problem, I imagine, in Ukraine. And, it could lead to a lot of people that either can't revert back to normal life, or when they revert back, there may well be an element of criminality there. They might find that there's, domestic abuse going on instead, or just it's going to be a big social problem, even once the fighting is played out. But yeah, so that was just a little bit of info on the Azov Battalion that I found very interesting, sort of watching and learning a bit about this. I must say it wasn't really something I paid any attention to until about 3 weeks ago when the war began, and now I find it interesting. And I do like watching these videos of them zooming around their BTR shooting up tanks, because it honestly is like playing a computer game, a black and white computer game, admittedly, but it's real life. Of course, you don't know. I haven't seen them shooting any soldiers, so you don't know if those tanks even had a crew in them. They may have just literally found a vehicle. It seems there's a lot of abandoned fighting vehicles and tanks and things just knocking around where they've run out of petrol, for example, or other supplies, and it seems the Russian doctrine is to leave them until their mates can catch up and resupply them. But it seems that a lot of Russian farmers have been dragging away with their tractors, even though they've still got their Zeds on them. If you haven't got any yellow paint, because they're meant to paint over the Zeds in yellow paint to cover them up, then it's been nicked by the Ukraine. If they don't do that, they just stick a massive Ukrainian flag on it and drag it off. And so, yeah, it's remarkable. It's a war like this in a technological age where we all have smartphones, and even in besieged cities, it seems they have internet access so they can upload their videos of them destroying things. So we watch and we wait with interest.